Hello YouTube. Today I want to tell you more about Yakutia, which is the land of mysteries and wonders. I had some videos previously about the secrets of the Russian Arctic and UFOs and USOs. Now let me tell you something more, and this is the ongoing investigation into this rather incredible and very hard to reach piece of our planet. Yakutia is located in the north of the Asiatic part of Russia. And it's an enormous country. It covers 3 million square feet. Almost half of Yakutia's territory is located inside the Arctic Circle. And Yakutia's bowels are full of natural resources: coals, gas, silver, gold, and diamonds, to name just some of them. It's a very, very diverse natural environment, and you can find many unusual natural phenomena in the area as well. To make it short, regarding the background, I just want to let you know that the Russian Kazakhs in the 17th century were sent by the Tsar to look for new lands and expand his empire, and they conquered the land that we call Yakutia. They also call it Sakha. The local people do. The city of Yakutsk became a staging site for further expeditions as Russia expanded further east to the Pacific Ocean and encountered very interesting mysteries. Now, Moscow did not do much to improve the lot of the local people, and Yakutia became the empire's favorite place to send exile political prisoners to. The Soviet Union wasn't much better. Actually, a lot of political prisoners were sent to the territory, and I should say it was much worse than the empire before it. But here we are concerned with anomalous phenomenon of the faraway land. Yakutia has plenty of unusual paranormal phenomena, but few people outside of Russia know about this. I want to tell you about very unusual lakes and things that live in them. It's almost impossible to get to those lakes, and actually very few humans can claim that they've seen the waters of Labinkir Lake and Vorota Lake in Yakutia. But there may be underground passages between the two lakes, just as there may be in lakes of Namibia, as I told you about in my previous video, on the other side of the world. But the secrets sometimes are very identical, whether in the hot deserts of Africa or in the cold permafrost land of Yakutia. To get to the lakes, one must go through mountains and swamps, through the thickest taiga of Siberia. But the Soviet geologists were able to reach the lakes in 1953 and made a sensational discovery. Viktor Tverdokhlebov and Boris Bashakatov, scientists and explorers of the Sodornokh Plateau, made their way to the shores of Vorota Lake in July. Tverdokhlebov was in charge of a geological expedition of the Eastern Siberian branch of the Soviet Academy of Scientists. The day was sunny, cloudless, and windless. The geologists looked at the surface of the large lake and noticed an object at a distance of 300 meters. Sunlight made the object glitter. Initially, they assumed that what they saw was an empty gasoline barrel. Soon, however, the Soviet scientists saw that the object was full of life, and it quickly swam to the shore, to the spot where they were standing. Both men climbed on a shore terrace about 20 meters high and continued their observations. The animal was advancing, and they were able to see a part of its body they classified as the head. It was 2 meters wide. The eyes were widely set. The length of the animal's body was about 10 meters. It was massive, its color dark gray. There were 2 light-colored spots resembling eyes on the creature's head. A spinal fin-like attachment was approximately half a meter in size. The animal lunged forward powerfully. Its upper body appeared and then disappeared under the water. The animal caused waves to roll on the surface of the lake. Some 100 meters before the shore, it stopped and then began to energetically thump and splash about, and finally dived under the water. The animal was gone, and the geologists had observed the surface of the lake in vain for half an hour. They came to a conclusion that the animal they observed was a previously unknown predator. Tverdokhlyebov wrote in his diary that the animal exhibited an untamed, merciless, intelligent rage in its every movement and its appearance. The scientist published his observations in the media, Soviet media, in 1961, and as a result of this, he received numerous, well, let's call them caustic remarks. Yet the local population reported similar sightings of a lake monster. The closest to the lake settlement was Tampor, some 120 meters away. Still, a number of hunters, fishermen, and reindeer breeders did reach the shores of the lake. In December of 1958, a local newspaper, Молодежь Yakutii, initiated actually a discussion about the northern monsters. Now, a monster in the Labinkir Lake gained ill fame among the locals. We should keep in mind that the inhabitants of Tampor have legends about an animal they call devil. According to them, this devil has dwelt in the lake from immemorial times and has a very aggressive disposition. Now, the lake itself is covered with ice most of the year. During cold Yakutia winters, there are unfrozen patches of waters in the midst of the icebound lake. Next to them, the locals have found tracks of large animals. Perhaps one of such animals is the devil that stole hunting dogs and attacked fishing rafts. As a result of one such encounter, it was determined that the beast had a huge mouth and jaws, and its eyes were of dark gray color. Once an unknown creature chased a Yakut fisherman on the ground after it emerged from the waters of the lake. In the late 1970s, a hobbled horse belonging to a geologist was attacked in the night by an unknown predator. The horse neighed noisily and then let out a death rattle. By the time the geologists were free of their sleeping bags, the animal was pulled into the waters of the Labinkir Lake. They found traces that looked like those made by a bear, only much larger. Pavel Vinokurov, a local collective farm worker, once found a huge jaw of an unknown animal. The jaw had teeth and was so big that if placed vertically, it could allow a mounted rider to pass through it. I've been very much intrigued by Yakutia's lakes and the cryptozoological puzzles that exist in their waters. My archives contain articles printed in the Russian, Soviet, now Belarusian newspapers, as well as books that have discussed Yakutia to some extent. I also talked to people who lived in Yakutia, so a truly puzzling account emerges from my research. Tverdokhlyebov's stories and articles prompted the authorities to send several expeditions to both lakes. None of the expeditions discovered any traces of cryptozoology until 2000. One of the critics of Tverdokhlyebov's claims was a senior scientist from the Institute of the Permafrost Research. His last name was Tolstov. He asserted that the animal sighted in the lake was a huge catfish, 5 meters in length and weighing 300 pounds. However, no catfish ever existed in a lake they call Labinkir. Another critic asserted that the unknown animal was an old pike of considerable size. One possible explanation is that the radiation from the secret military bases and Soviet research centers had seeped into the ground and caused mutations among amphibious animals or fish. In August of 2000, a group of journalists from Komsomolskaya Pravda newspaper mounted an expedition to the shores of Labinkir Lake. They made their way through the impassable roads on cross-country vehicles. Using echo-sounding devices, they searched the bottom of the lake and discovered two moving objects. The lake is 15 kilometers long and 63 meters deep. One of the objects of the journalists registered was 18 meters long, and the other was approximately 3 to 5 meters. They moved at speeds of 4 to 5 and 6 to 7 kilometers per hour respectively. Also, the researchers were able to see a trail from one of the moving objects. It resembled a turbid deck of a submarine. There was a letter published in Komsomolskaya Pravda on January 21, 2000, and it talked about the devil of Labenkir Lake. The writer, Vladimir Asachi from Moscow, revealed that in November of 1979, he and a group of tourists from Yakutsk came to the shores of Labenkir. They had heard stories about the Nessie of the lake. That is why really they decided to visit the area. The lake was covered with ice, and the tourists made their way in the middle of the reservoir, about 2 kilometers from the shore. They made a rest stop halfway and sat down on their backpacks. Someone paid attention to the shore at the right side along the team's route. There was something black. Was it a bent pillar? The tourists ran toward it, leaving behind their skis and backpacks through snow. When they reached the spot about 15 minutes later, the Russian tourists noticed that the black spot disappeared. They ascended to a terrace. It was 2 meters high. Then the tourists saw an unfrozen patch of water. They approached it, hoping to learn something. The hole was quite interesting. Its diameter is about a meter, and its edges seemed to be licked. Despite a very low temperature, the hole was free of any ice. The tourists decided that some underwater beast used the patch for breathing purposes. Those of the team who stayed behind told them that later that the pillar shook several times as the tourists made their way to the site and later disappeared. In the morning, the team searched the area very thoroughly in two groups, and they discovered another unfrozen patch not too far away from the first one. But this patch was covered with ice, about 3 centimeters thick. The edges were licked too, and the diameter was the same. And then they met a hermit, whose name was Alyams, who lived in the area. He told them that only once did he actually see the devil of the lake. There was a very credible observer of the devil, a well-known researcher of the snowman phenomenon in the USSR, Professor Boris Porshnev, and I mentioned him in my videos about the snowman of Russia. Thank you. Please share and subscribe.